ended up doing this video backwards because I had never made this hat or really done any, I did the brioche hat from Tutiet, but I'd never really done like a Fair Isle, which is what this is considered. I'm going to end up making a video because I learned a new technique from Kristen Mangus that I learned after I made this hat on how to keep your floats from being very long. So the problem with when you do color work, these are called floats, where you carry over your color. Okay, so these aren't terribly long, and because of the way this yarn is, it's really not too bad. But there is a technique that I just discovered where all of these can actually look like this. So I will redo it and hopefully get a video, or maybe Kristen will have one before I get a chance to do it. But I'm not going to do one right away because this was really time consuming. But I'm going to show a little bit of the video on how I did this. But if you go to my Ravelry link in the description, you will see the link to Kristen's live Facebook feed where she shows you how to do the technique. Now, you really can't do Fair Isle, which is what this is called, or color work on anything small, anything larger than 5/8 inch gauge. So 5/8 is how far it is from one peg to the other. So if you're using the super extra large gauge looms, it's not going to look good. So you need to do it on a 5/8 or a half or 3/8, which are usually the most common smaller ones. So the other thing is, because the E-wrap stitch is so stretchy, you have to do the true knit stitch. And if you don't know how to do the true knit stitch, I show you in this video, but you can also go to Denise at or Loomahat, and Denise runs Loomahat, and she shows you the 4 different knit stitches. I'll show you the 3 most common ones. So this is the E-wrap. Okay, see how loose it is, and it looks really vastly different from a true knit stitch. This is actually in needle knitting called knitting through the back loop or the twisted knit stitch. So what happens when you do color work, if you use the E-wrap stitch and the hat has any stretch to it, you're going to be able to see the other thread color behind it. So when you use a stitch like this one, which is the true knit stitch, see, it's not going to stretch to where you can see the color behind it. So you really need to use, for it to look nice, you need to use the regular knit stitch. This is up top here. This is a U-knit, and a U-knit stitch is fairly tight as well, but it ends up being really tight. So I just really like the true knit stitch because it looks a lot more like needle knitting, and it works really well for doing color work. Now, with that in mind, because the hat is not going to have as much stretch, it's going to be really thick too because you're working with 2 colors. Because it doesn't have as much stretch, you're going to need to make it on a loom bigger than what you think you need. If you were going to make a hat for an adult with hair, you would need to use at least the 48 peg 5/8 inch gauge loom. This is the original Nifty Knitter. Cindy Wood makes a comparable loom. If you use this yarn, which is Hometown USA, then this would be the loom you would want to use. If you use a smaller weight yarn and a smaller gauge loom, that would be okay as well. So you could use, this is a 1/2 inch gauge Cindy Wood loom. So you could use, I would still use a number 5, but you could use a lighter number 5. For instance, Charisma from Michaels would be a good choice for a 1/2 inch gauge loom for that stitch. If you wanted to use a number 4 worsted weight, okay, like this one, which is what all your Red Heart Super Savers are, number 4s, and a fine gauge loom, this is 3/8 of an inch. You could also do it on this loom as well, but I would still use the true knit stitch. All right, that being said, I'm going to edit together what I did on this hat. There are also pattern notes and a link to the pattern in the description below. And then I will come back and make another video showing how to use the technique I just learned from Kristen Mangus at Good Knit Kisses. All right, all that being said, let's cast on. When I cast on, I use my anchor peg. This is up to you, whether you want to use your anchor peg or not. My dog's talking to me. So I do a traditional cast on. You can do a chain cast on, which some people call a crochet cast on, but you actually do not need a crochet hook to do a chain cast on. So I'm going to go around the back of this peg. This yarn got goofed. That's okay. And wrap it twice. And then I'm going to knit it over. The chain cast on goes a lot faster. And I kind of like the chain cast on, but I'm not completely sold on it yet. And maybe it's because my technique is not that good yet. And so anyway, okay. And then you're going to want to tighten your yarn up in the back, not super tight, especially with these Cindy Wood pegs, because it ends up being really hard to lift it over if you get it too tight. But we are not going to fold this brim over, so you do want a nice, snug cast-on edge. This is a handy little trick here that I saw somebody do. So when you're casting on, take your working yarn behind the peg, take your loom hook, hold it here, keep wrapping around, okay? So now it looks like that. And now see how you have a loose loop to lift over, and then you can tighten it up. Okay, so let's do that again. So behind, grab this with your hook. Okay, lift it over, it's nice and loose, and then just tighten it up. For this hat, I'm going to do a 2x2 ribbing, and that means 2 E-wraps, 2 purls, 2 pegs of E-wrap, 2 purl. You could do 1 by 1. You could do 1 E-wrap, 1 purl, whatever you want. It's not really going to make a huge difference on this particular hat, but I am going to do 2 and 2. So the way I do that, your working yarn comes behind your first peg, wrap it around. Second peg, same thing. And there are slower videos on doing purl stitches if you need them. We're going to go down through the top, scoop up this yarn, make a new loop, pull this loop off of this peg, okay, and replace it with the one I just made and tighten it up. Okay, make a new loop, pull it off. And this first row may be a little bit tight, but it will get looser as you knit. Put that one back on and tighten it up. Then you wrap your next 2, right, and purl the next 2. Meet me back here when you're finished. Once you get back to your starting peg, you will simply go around and knit over all of your E-wraps. And then we're going to do one more row like this one. Okay, meet me back here. So far we did our cast on row, and we've done 1 round of 2x2 rib, meaning 2 knits, 2 purls. We're going to do 1 more round in the white of the 2x2 ribbing. So 1 more round exactly like what you did, 2 E-wrap, 2 purl, 2 E-wrap, 2 purl, and meet me back here. Now that you have finished 2 rows of rib stitch in the white, we're going to change colors to the red. Because it's going to be quite a few rows until I'm going to use the white again, I will go ahead and cut my yarn, and I do leave a long tail, and the reason why is once you put your needle in here, you want plenty of room to, be able to weave in your ends. Okay, so better too long of a tail than too short. Okay, this is my red, and I'm going to cut off this yarn that's frayed. Okay, this is my red, and I'm going to leave a relatively long tail. Like I said, better to be too long than too short. So I'm going to make a slip knot. There are lots of, I see a lot of people doing this very complicated. That's how I do it. So you want to put your red yarn on your first peg. Oops. You want your working yarn on this side and your tail over here. Okay. So I'm going to tighten this up. Okay. And I'm going to tie these two together. If you do not do this, you will end up with a slight gap in your work. So I go ahead and tie a knot here, and then we're going to worry about the tails later. Okay, you want to continue with the same stitch you were doing in the white. So you have a loop here already in your slip knot, so you do not wrap that one again. Wrap this one, then you're going to purl the next two. So you're doing exactly the same stitch pattern you were doing. You're just now adding the red. Okay, and I think since I haven't made this hat yet, I have not decided how many rows I'm going to do. I will edit this video and let you know, but I'm thinking probably 6 to 8 rows. So keep going around and make about 6 rows and meet me back here. Well, I actually ended up doing 7 rows of the red. Okay, and what I did was I just measured it until it was about 2 inches. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and cut our red yarn because we aren't going to use it anymore. Okay, once again, I cut a relatively long tail so that I can have plenty to weave in. And now we're going to switch to the blue. So this next round, we will start with the blue. Okay, this is my beginning peg. All you're going to do is make a slip knot, okay? And then I want the tail to the left because I go this direction. And I'm just going to tie it on there. And then we'll tie it onto the red. This prevents having a gap when you change colors. Sorry, that's my crazy dog. Okay. So what I'm going to do is on the first stitch, just because we're just starting out, I'm going to put my slip knot here, and I'm just simply going to knit over, okay? Now, there are 4 different types of knit stitches. Right there, what I just did would be called a U-wrap, because you just make the letter U and then wrap the bottom stitch over. That's a very tight stitch. I tried this before with an E-wrap stitch, and with this being a large gauge loom, the white stitches showed through. So I don't want as tight as a U-knit, and I don't want as loose as an E-wrap. So we're going to do a true knit stitch, and you might see this abbreviated as TK, whereas an E-wrap will be EW. Okay, so the yarn will go on top of the peg. You're going to go underneath the bottom loop, okay? Grab the top yarn, pull it down, making a new loop. It's just exactly the reverse of a purl. Pulling it off and placing it on the peg. Yes, it's going to be more time consuming underneath, but I think it's going to look better. And I hope this one turns out, because I already frogged down to the brim the last go around. And then pull that off and replace it, okay? So true knit goes on the top, and we're not doing any purls right now, so you don't need to worry about purl stitch. It's just the reverse of a purl, okay? We're going to do, let's do 2 rounds in the blue of the true knit stitch and meet me back here. Okay, because the true knit stitch is a lot tighter than an E-wrap, I went ahead and did 4 rows, okay, of the blue. And now I'm going to start on doing the little white snowflake speckles. So all we're going to do, same thing again, going to make a slip knot, and we're going to put it on peg number 1. I tried this before, so I'm trying something a little bit different, and we'll see if it works. So for peg number 1, all I'm going to do, okay, peg number 1, all I'm going to do is just knit this one over because that's our starting peg, okay? So from here on out, what I'm going to do is do 2 blues and a white, 2 blues and a white, okay? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go back. I'm going to lay my white yarn back here. I'm going back to the true knit stitch for these 2 pegs. So I think by making this tighter, you won't be able to see what are called floats on the back of the second color. Okay, I'm going to do the true knit stitch again. Go under, grab my yarn, pull it through, and replace it. It's really hard to do this in film. Okay, now I'm going to bring my white yarn, I'm going to bring my white yarn back here because I'm going to wrap this peg. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the true knit stitch here with the white. So I'm going to go underneath. I hope this is going to work out better because the last time, doing the same stitch you've been doing, the true knit stitch. Okay, so what we're going to have, and this is the only thing I don't like about color work on the loom, these are called floats. So that's where you carry your color from one peg to the other peg. But I'm hoping that by doing this knit stitch, you can see it, how much tighter it is than an E-wrap. You won't be able to see these floats behind it. So then you're going to always lay your work to the back. Bring it here. Bring it to the color you're not working with, bring to the inside of the pegs there. And, oops. Now I'm going to do a true knit stitch on this peg. Going to do another true knit stitch on this peg. Oops. Okay. And then now it'll be time for the white again. All right, so now I'm going to bring the white behind these 2 pegs, front of this peg, and do the same type of stitch, true knit stitch. Okay, so you do this all the way around your loom, skipping 2 pegs, and 1 white peg, 2 blue pegs, 1 white peg, 2 blue pegs. Okay, so start 1 white, 2 blue, 1 white, 2 blue, and then your inside is going to look like that, where you're going to have your floats in the white. Okay, I think I'll have an easier time showing it from this angle. So I have my white and I have my blue. I just did 1 white peg here, okay? All right, and then I did 2 blues. So the white is going behind the 2 blues that I just did, coming in the front of this one. Okay, so right here, I'm going to do the true knit stitch, which is the reverse of the purl. And place it like that, okay? This is what it looks like on the inside of your loom, okay? Now I'm going to just leave this one hanging here. And I'm going to bring the the blue one front. I can do it from this angle a lot easier. It's just hard for me to stand up and try to do it with the camera in front of me. This is easier. Okay. See, I have a white, 2 blue, and that's my pattern. White, 2 blue, white, 2 blue. Okay. Then I'm going to come back behind the 2 blues, 1, 2 blues, and to the front of the next peg, and do the true knit stitch again. This yarn is so stranded and it's hard to grab. Okay, all right. So then you're just going to continue around your loom, and this is what it'll look like on the inside. And meet me back when you get to the end. Okay, I'm getting close to my last few pegs, and I did a white, and then I've done these 2 blue and blue, and then I'm going to do this one in white, and I'm going to have 1 peg left over because I don't want this one to be white, but that's fine. So if you have an odd number of pegs, if you have a 48 peg, this should work out pretty well. But if you don't, it's no big deal because these are just little speckles. So I'm going to make the last one. So instead of having 2 blue pegs between the 2 whites, I'm just going to have 1, and that's okay. Okay. Now I'm going to do at least 2 more rows, since I'm kind of doing this on the fly and seeing how I like it as I go along. I'm going to do 2 more rows of just the blue. Don't worry about the white, just leave it here at the back of your loom and just move it out of the way as you go around, and you're going to do the same thing as you did before. I'm going to knit every peg in the blue and the true knit stitch. Okay, so do 2 rows, do 2 rows and meet me back here.